Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session with your host,
Michael Rearden.
Michael, hey.
Hey, how we doing, Chad?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good, good, good. So glad to have you on. So one of the things I definitely want to talk about today is the breakout of average mentality. What got you into that, I guess you could say, line of profession to help people with that line of thought?
I think I've always wanted to do that, Michael. And I wouldn't have been able to put words to it years ago, but what I realized at a very young age is that our society was starting to normalize really unhealthy behavior. That was in relationships, it was in health, it was in finances, it was in business. And just real quick backstory on me, I was homeschooled in the 80s, like long before it was cool. Like my mom used to make our own clothes, and it was pretty intense. We were pretty hardcore homeschooled. But what it got me used to was doing things differently. And you mentioned it in a podcast recently, kind of going back to COVID, where there was so much pressure to just line up with everybody else, do what everybody else was doing. And like there's been a part of me that's always kind of braced against that, not from a purely rebellious standpoint, but looking at the crowd and realizing I don't want to go where they're all going. I want to end up with different results than they're getting. So I need to do something differently. And I think a big part of my why has always been to empower others to swim against the stream, to go against the tide, and to do things differently so they get a different result. And I just happen to be doing it in finances.
Okay. There is a trend, as you can, or as you said, with homeschooling, like when it was, back in the 80s, I'm sure it was maybe a couple 100,000. Now it's millions of people who homeschool their children, and people are starting to realize like they don't want their children to be normalized. They don't want them to be indoctrinated through the school system. They want to teach them what they would like for them to understand and know, their values. As a parent, you should be in full control of your children's identity and values because they're basically your heirs to the throne, right? We can go all the way back to medieval times where they didn't necessarily have kids because they wanted to have kids to play with. It was because they wanted a successor, someone to be better than them, someone to continue on the legacy. But today, we kind of just fall in line. And we can look at John Rockefeller, his mentality for the school system. He wants factory workers, right? Average, right? The 9 to 5 people. But when you fall into that average, many people start to struggle because they're not finding fulfillment. They're not finding happiness. There are so many things missing because they're sacrificing their true identity. How do you get people into the mindset that if you want to change your life, you have to be the proponent to that?
Well, you brought up so many good things. We could spend an entire episode talking about like 3 or 4 things you just mentioned. But I think the school system, and not to pick on it, I mean, not everybody is able to homeschool. I get that. But the school system sometimes prepares kids to be good at school. It prepares somebody to take a test. And a lot of times in life, there is no right answer. Sometimes you're picking between only wrong answers. It seems like only difficult choices. And what I want for my kids is to be able to critically think and to learn and to work through situations, not just to have more knowledge, but to know how to execute that knowledge to actually make a difference in their life. And what this goes back to what you just said about basically moving into the driver's seat of your life. So many people are focused on all the things that they can't control. They end up looking over the things in their life that they can control. And I'll just give you an example, like from finances. I mean, right now, everybody's focused on the election. They're focused on inflation. They're focused on stuff going on in the Middle East. They're focusing on interest rates, taxes. Like all those things matter, absolutely, but you can't control any of them. And if we spend our time pushing our effort and energy towards things that we can't control, we end up coming to a place of learned helplessness where we've trained ourselves to believe that everything important in my life, as far as the trajectory of how my life plays out, is out of my control. It's really easy to just sit on the sidelines of your own life and wait for life to happen to you rather than purposefully happening to your own life.
I'm going to ask you a personal question. I don't know if I'm the only one. Are you like the main teacher for your children's homeschooling? or is it the wife or
No,
girlfriend?
it's my wife. So we have 6 kids,
Okay.
and my wife is the primary. I do stuff with them in the evening. We have
Mhm.
kind of a family Bible time at the end of the day, and
Mm,
I do mostly that teaching, and I do teach a class, an adult Sunday school at our church, but most of the homeschooling actually falls on my wife's shoulders because I'm running the business, and actually one of my daughters works for me now, so we're incorporating some on the job training into her homeschool, but my wife runs that show and does a tremendous job.
Okay, so I'm the only one who struggles with that. My wife, she means good, but probably just because my teaching background, I'm just so much better at it. So I have to make time in my week to educate, the children. But, either, here or there, she does a great job with other things. But when it comes to education, I have to take the reins there. But so good to know, right? And I was just thinking about doing some Bible study with my kids too, like in the evenings or something like that, because we were talking about schooling. We were like, oh, are we going to like send them to Catholic school or Montessori school? Like kind of like to offset some of it because we were going to do the majority homeschool and then kind of introduce them here and there a year or whatever they need for the development process. But then we're like, probably not Catholic with all the stuff going on. So we're probably going to do a lot of groups and stuff like that. We have so many things here in Texas for kids, like play groups and activities. We have libraries with all of these activities. I know many churches that have youth groups and they have kids clubs within them. So there are just so many things for children to lean into and parents to utilize. But I think we jumped the gun a little bit. Can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
My name is Chad Hufford, and I run Veritas Wealth Management, and we make sure people don't run out of money or purpose in retirement. And Michael, it's an honor to be here today to encourage your audience to live more purposeful and intentional lives, not just in their finances, but in every area.
Yeah, very true. What is the biggest concern that individuals have when they walk into your office for the first time?
Am I on track for retirement? Th- will I run out of money in retirement and end up being a burden to my kids, to my family, or simply just be broke on a park bench? And we have people who are way off track wondering those same questions, and we have people coming in who are multimillionaires wondering those same questions. We live in a world with so much uncertainty, and like I already mentioned, a lot of our focus is on things that we can't control. When that is where our energy, when our vision is directed towards those things, even if somebody has prepared very well, it can make them feel very helpless and wondering, man, I don't know if I've done enough. I don't know if I have enough. And a lot of people don't have a plan. A lot of people have kind of, even if they've saved well, they've spent their career collecting investments rather than building strategically. And I think people do that in every area of their life. They kind of just they live on accident a little bit. And I think that's we get busy, we get our world is so full of distractions, but what we try to do is to reset people's vision, make it more purposeful, more specific, and give them a game plan or a roadmap to follow so they're acting on a plan and not reacting to this crazy world around us.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get into the aspect and the mindset of strategic building because it could be anything. It could be your kids, you're building them up. It could be your career, you're building them up. It could be your retirement, you're building for that. And sometimes when it comes to our future date, our future self, is almost like it takes a back burner where we will say, that's a later problem. That's not a problem for me today. Right now, I'm so concerned about how I'm going to keep a roof over my head, let alone worrying about retirement. Because, yes, inflation is high, interest rates are high, there's a lot of uncertainty, but it doesn't mean that you have to remain in that mentality. Many people, they just allow their circumstances to define them. If they have a money problem or a spending problem, they go, well, I have a money problem. Oh, well, I have a spending problem. And they don't do the things to remedy them. It's like almost like if you have a broken arm or something, or broken leg, it's even worse. You're like, I guess I just have a broken leg. No, you're going to go to the doctor. You're going to go get it fixed, right? You want to be able to walk again. Why don't people do that with their finances?
I think it's that learned helplessness that we just went back to. That again, my industry, not my office, but my industry teaches people to focus on all the things they can't control.
Mm,
When you've done that for a certain amount of time, it's almost like you're waiting for somebody to rescue you from your financial situation. because you've been trained to believe that you can't do the work to fix it. And I think that's absolutely true in finances. It's true in other areas as well. But when our focus is on the things that we can't influence, it's really easy to fall into that learned helplessness. The other thing that you brought up is kind of this idea of money issues being fixed with more money. And people feeling like, they're behind on credit cards, or they're not saving enough, or whatever the issue is. The tendency is for people to think, I need more income to fix that problem. Like, more money is going to fix my money problems. And the joke or the analogy I always make, it's like giving a teenager a Corvette. More horsepower doesn't fix bad driving. So if somebody doesn't operate a Honda Civic very well, giving them a Ferrari isn't going to fix that driving. They're just going to get into problems even faster because they have more horsepower and velocity headed in the wrong direction. So people need to focus on what they can control, learn to manage the circumstances that they're in, not trying to fix that with more money. And the last thing I would just say to this is this idea of the distraction. Like, it's so easy to get caught up in the day to day. I mean, you're in Texas, I'm in Alaska, big oil field states. We work with a ton of people in the oil field. That's one of our biggest niches. I've had multiple people tell me, like, my industry is so volatile. I mean, I don't even know if I'm going to have a job in 6 weeks, and you're telling me to plan 30 years in the future, and it is difficult. Those types of pressures cause us to almost treat the future version of ourselves as if it's a different person. Like, future Chad, future Michael, like, that's their problem in the future. I'm just going to do me today. And I think it's really important to try to introduce somebody to the future version of themselves and make that more tangible, because every decision, every choice you make, you are either serving or stealing from the future version of you.
My wife and I were just talking about going on to Alaska cruise too. So it's funny that you're from Alaska, because there's so many opportunities out there for individuals to partake in, but yet many people don't know how to do it. We talked about the schooling in the beginning. And one of the things schooling doesn't do is they don't help you with financial literacy. They don't help you understand the goods and the bads, what to do. Luckily for me, I had an accounting class in high school, but it was an optional class, right? I think we had maybe 20 kids in there or something like that. And that was the only time I ever seen that class on the curriculum, or like, like where you can take that class as an extra. It was basically, you can choose gym or accounting. So, all the high school kids were like, yeah, I'm gonna do gym.
I'm gonna do
And
gym,
so
yeah.
it's just more fun. So they get to hang out, play ball, do whatever. But you miss out on big opportunities. And if parents don't do the job to educate their children, or to, at some point, if you're a young adult, put your own finances and your well-being into your own hands, this is where many of the problems start to stem. As you said, high credit card debts, things like that, managing money. People are just not there mentally because they just haven't been immersed in it. One of the things that I do with my kids is we do money things, right? So we have real
Yes.
money, we count it, we have different jars, saving, investing. Saving can also be for, retirement, things along those lines. So you can have as many jars as you want. Giving jar, some people have just 3, some people have 5 or 7, depending on what you would like to teach them, right? But what you teach them is what they're going to keep for the rest of their life. And if you do not give them these money habits when they are adults, this is when they're going to struggle the most. And you have to ask yourself, if you didn't have that as an adult or as a child, you have to do everything in your power to get it right now. So if you weren't trained when you were younger, train yourself now. Don't say, well, my mom or my dad didn't teach me, the schools didn't teach me. We have to take ownership for the things that we don't know. And, for me, when I started investing, I was 18. And I remember when I went to my financial advisor for the first time. And this was like right before the housing crash in 2008 or 9,
2008.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I had asked him, I was like, well, there's just so much uncertainty going on, and I don't want to invest, my money because I'm going to lose it. And the only thing he said was, I wish I was 18 when I started investing, because it doesn't matter if you lose everything. If you develop the habit and you remain consistent, compound interest is going to take effect, and you're going to come out on top. And many people are so worried about their hand. Like, think of it as they're at a casino or something. They put it all on black. They're like, all right, I'm betting it all on black. But that's not the reality, right? We're building ourselves up. Think of it as like if you're going to the gym, you might not lift 225 the first day, but you build yourself up steadily. Why are so many people adverse to building themselves up slowly, and they want everything so quickly and rapidly?
Because we live in a microwave society, Michael. Like it's 6-minute abs, 5-minute rice, one click ordering. Like that's what we want. And um, we we have learned that patience is unnecessary, and it's a bad lesson. But we've learned that we can have immediate gratification, and we often sacrifice our future for the present. And we tell people all the time, we're not trying to get rich quick. It's about building wealth slowly and sustainably. And but again, you're fighting against society. It's one of the first things people need to learn is daring to be different, not getting sucked into the habits of everybody around them. Because what you said about not creating good money habits is important, but we all have money habits. Money is a part of your life. And just like your health, if you don't pay attention to it, it will deteriorate. So we all have money habits. They might be good, they might be bad, but we all have money habits. We just have to be mindful of what those are and be willing to build slowly. And we use the metaphor of an orchard. You plant those trees and it's not exciting. There's a world of difference between speculating in quote unquote investments that are super exciting and they change and it's crazy and all that, slowly building wealth. It should be like watching an orchard grow. You're planting seeds, the storms come, they get scary. You think this is not a good time for me to be planting an orchard, but you plant anyway, you do the hard things. And one day you wake up, you're like, there's a beautiful orchard that can sustain me and my family for the rest of my life. But it takes years, it takes decades of diligently planting, ignoring the weather, and just going out and doing what most people aren't willing to do. That's how wealth is created. But it doesn't happen overnight. It does not happen easily, and it takes a tremendous amount of grit and perseverance. And I mean, grit is a 4-letter word these days. It's just, we want what we want right now with as little cost as possible. And that's just the wrong mentality to build anything in your life. I don't care if it's a business, a relationship, a body, or wealth. We have to be willing to sacrifice today for what most people won't have in the future.
hmm Yeah. And, we just live in this world where we want the easy, as you said. And as long as you want the easy, you're going to always be looking at what could have been. I know many people, they struggle with their weight right now because they get their Uber Eats and they get their fast foods, right? It's quick. And then they look in the mirror and they're just not satisfied. And so they might go on a shopping spree, right? They have a self-care day to buy some pocketbooks, some new clothes because they don't fit into their old clothes, maybe. And they just kind of do this system that doesn't necessarily make them a better individual. So they have low self-esteem. They are stressed about this, yet they might not want to present it to the world. Anxiety, fear, all of these things are things that are inhibiting their growth. And one of the things that you said, and I like to make things clear for people because if you beat around the bush, sometimes it's nice, but I like to sometimes give it, clear, defined things so people can, get their pens, get their notepads, and this is a sign, people. I'm telling you, get your pens, get your notepads, get your notes from your Apple or your Android phones, and get ready to write these down. You said something that people focus on the things that they can't control sometimes. What are things that people can control and what are things that people can't control? So, like, give us some real life examples so people can start to look at that and envision this for themselves and their life and their situation.
Okay, so one of the secrets to building wealth is not a secret at all. It's simply living within your means. So people want to find the next hottest growth fund or what's going to be the next Amazon or Apple stock that I can invest in and be a millionaire overnight. They're so focused on the investment that they ignore their own responsibility as the investor. It doesn't matter how good your investment is if you don't feed it. It doesn't matter how good the tree is if you don't plant enough of them, right? So living within your means, that is something somebody can control. It might mean that you drive a 20-year-old car. It might mean that you shop at thrift stores. It might mean you don't go out to eat very often. But living within your means is something that you can control. People can't control their investment return rate, but they very much have control over their investing, their savings rate. Too many people focus on return rate, not enough on savings rate. So that's just a couple examples. We can control whether or not we're on a budget. Do we tell our money where to go, or do we look at the end of the month and wonder where it went? We can control how often we look at our investments. People that watch it every day, again, it's like that orchard. If you go out every single day, count your branches, measure your trees, you're gonna get frustrated, you get upset. It's gonna be hard to have a long-term perspective. People watching their mutual funds or their stocks every day, multiple times a day, especially during kind of the craziness we've been experiencing the past couple of weeks, it steals your focus off the long term. And just think of it from a health standpoint. Like let's say, Michael, you've got a 20-year reunion coming up, and you're trying to lose 15 pounds. You can't necessarily control if you lose 15 pounds, but you can control, do you eat after 6 o'clock at night? Are you going to go wake up at 6 in the morning to go to the gym? Are you going to be the strongest guy in the gym? Maybe not, but you're going to get it in there and you're going to do what you can. Most people don't have a plan to allow their life to go off the rails as they get older. Most people don't have a plan to end up obese and broke and in debt, but nobody has a plan not to. And that's the problem with what a lot of us, when we don't have a roadmap showing us the alignment, like, are your actions and decisions in line with the future version of yourself? If we don't have something like that, it's too easy to take the easy road in the short term, to take what is comfortable, what is convenient in the short term. It's stopping by at McDonald's instead of going home, making yourself a nice salad or something like that, right? The long-term choices are almost always inconvenient. And if you don't have the accountability and a plan holding you to that alignment, it's really hard to stick to it. And then it's easier to point the fingers at what we can't control instead of owning what we can control. Like, you know what? Yeah, stock market's crazy right now, or the elections are crazy or whatever, but I didn't save what I could have, or I spent too much, or it's people have to take ownership of their lives, take responsibility, even if things aren't their fault. You might be in a circumstance like maybe nobody did teach you about money. Maybe nobody taught you about investing. Like, and you're starting from square one and you're 45 years old. That may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to fix it.
Very true. I know we have a couple audience members who like Dave Ramsey's and like the baby steps and stuff like that. And one of the things Dave says is like you have to eat rice and beans or something. Like if
Rice and
you're
beans
like
and beans and rice.
beans and rice, if you're in high credit card debt or if you're not making enough, you're living beyond your means. What are your steps? Like, are they similar to like Dave's, or like are they totally different and unique?
We actually are affiliated. I'm one of Dave Ramsey's SmartVestor Pros. We've got a couple of
Mm.
Dave Ramsey's coaches that work for me. One of the wonderful things about Veritas is we have the honor of taking Dave's principles, his broad-based principles, and applying them to specific people's paths and lives. And it's an awesome opportunity. It's a great partnership we've had for about 10 years, but it's absolutely necessary too. I mean, you talked about, you didn't say this verbatim, but you basically said most people are out there looking for a shortcut. It doesn't matter if they're trying to lose weight. It doesn't matter if they're trying to build wealth. People are looking for a pill or a supplement or a program or an app. Like, we're looking for the shortest, easiest path to get to where we want to be. And nothing good happens without sacrifice. And if somebody isn't saving enough, they have too much debt, you have to make cuts. And we get people that come in that get referred to us. They're like, yeah, I can't afford to save. I can't afford to save to retirement. I can't afford to pay off debt. And you sit down and you look at their budget and they're spending $1,200 a month going out to eat, or they're making $80,000 a year and they've got two $70,000 trucks. It's like you can't do some of those things until you make the sacrifices. But here's the cool thing, Michael, is it's not permanent. You don't always have to eat beans and rice. You don't always have to drive a 20-year-old vehicle. But for most people, there will be a period in your life where you will have to make those sacrifices today so you can do more of what you want tomorrow and in the future. But at some point, you have to pay the price. If you don't pay it up front, you'll end up paying it forever.
I think Dave has a saying also. It's like live like nobody so one day you can live like no one.
Live like nobody else, so later you can live like nobody else. And
Oh,
that's exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of this spot, like daring to live differently. Because here's what's normal. Normal is depressed, medicated, obese, broke, in debt, and undersaved. That's normal. So we have to break free from that. We have to be courageous enough to say, I want results different from what everybody else is doing. So I am willing to take a different path and take action that nobody else around me is willing to take because I want to end up where these people aren't going. I don't want to follow the herd to broke, desperate, and stupid. I want to take my own path and find a handful of people to take that path with me because I will need to be held accountable. I will need coaching. I will need encouragement, but I don't need the crowd. I just need a select few. I need my posse to go with me on this narrow road. And that's what it takes. It's daring to be different, living like no one else today so you can live like nobody else tomorrow.
now you got it because I was always struggling with that quote. I was like, what is that quote? So thank you for helping me out.
Yeah, and that's what it means. And that's what it means is acknowledging that you are going to have to look weird. You are going to have to do things differently. But we don't want to end up where everybody else is going. The herd, the crowd is almost never right and almost never head in the right direction. But it can be really lonely when you break away from that herd. And if people start doing this, you're going to notice friends and even family members trying to pull you back because when we start making decisions that are better for our future and start taking agency, start moving into the driver's seat of our own life, we actually unintentionally expose other people who aren't doing those things because they see you making those changes. They're like, I could do the same thing, but it's easier to pull you back into the comfort zone than to step out with you into uncertainty and discomfort. So even people who love you and care about you might be pulling you, trying to hold you back from breaking free from that. And it can be really difficult because human beings are oftentimes we're more willing to be wrong in a crowd than to be right by ourselves. And it's a really difficult choice to make.
What you just said in the past 5 minutes is something I've been saying for the past 500 episodes. Like this is something that people have to realize. And if they continually just not pay attention or not focus on what they can be doing, they are going to fall into that average, whether they want to or not, or they're going to get back to the normal of what is America currently. But yet there's so much opportunity out there that many people are not reaching for. And I always say that, you're not your circumstance. You can
Yes.
change who you are. And if you want to stay in your circumstance and say that, Chad, you're the problem, or Michael, you're the problem, or the government's the problem, or my mom or my dad's the problem, then you are always going to be in that mindset that there is a problem and there's no solution. So how can we orientate ourselves to look at the solution rather than only the problem? And it's good to understand the problem, right? It's just, you got a math problem or something. But then, we're trying to, solve it. For people who just always look at the problems and not solve it, they're going to have a list of problems in their life and they're not going to have any directive. They're not going to have any solutions. And they're going to wonder why that, their life is this. It's because you're only looking at the problem. We need to look at the fixes and what can help us.
And looking at what we can do rather than being frustrated with what we can't do. And you're absolutely right. And there's so much of what you said is there's a lot of wisdom in that because we look at the problems that we can't necessarily solve right away. And it's almost like waiting for somebody else to solve that for us rather than, okay, I'm going to take some ownership here. I'm going to step into it because you don't have to make a plan to be average. Average happens by its own or on its own. But nobody trips into excellence. Nobody stumbles into being wealthy and having great relationships, and nobody accidentally ends up with a six pack, in 30 years. Those things take intentionality and purpose and planning. And if we just let our lives unfold however they're going to do, that's the pathway to average. That's how you get to mediocre. Nobody has to plan to be mediocre. We have to come up with a plan to not end up in mediocrity. And I think a big step is taking control, taking ownership, and saying, I am responsible for certain circumstances in my life. I can't change everything about them, but I will change the things that I can. and making a decision to do that and making a plan. And that's what I love about Dave's baby steps. It isn't going to change everything overnight. You're taking small, purposeful steps in the right direction. Think about somebody running a marathon. While we're recording this, the Olympics are going on, right? Nobody training for the marathon for the first time is going to go out and run 26.2 miles. But you train. You're not going to go try to run a marathon. You train and you take that huge goal, you break it down to small steps. So for somebody, that might just be, I'm going to walk for 20 minutes. They might not even get a mile out of it, but they're making small steps in the right direction. That's what people need to be doing in not just their finances, but in all areas of life, living with more purpose and intentionality.
Are you familiar with a trend? I don't know if it's a social media trend or a money trend. It's called the Real Wealth Matrix.
I'm not, no.
Well, apparently, this like how you structure your money. Like you have your trust, and then you have like your holding company and stuff like that. So basically, like they walk you through it. But the question, it wasn't so much about the real wealth matrix. It was more of the difference between being rich and wealthy. What do you say on that?
I love it. Okay. So we could spend an hour talking about this, but the difference between rich and wealthy is when you're wealthy, you have what rich people don't have, and that is enough.
Mm.
And I meet people who have a lot of wealth, but can't experience wealth because they never have enough. The goalposts keep moving. There's always more, more, more. Having a plan, an actual financial plan with finite, measurable goals, not only does it help you get there, it lets you know when enough is enough. And the problem with building wealth towards retirement or towards any goal is, let's just say, building towards financial independence, because that's what most people come to us. They're like, I don't necessarily want to retire. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I want to get to a place where I no longer need a job. I want to have a job. They don't usually ask the question like this, but essentially what they're saying is, I want a job optional lifestyle. I don't want to need a paycheck for the rest of my life. But there's no referee on the sidelines lifting up his hand saying, touchdown, you made it. And if you're not careful, the goal line keeps moving. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of income, and they might even have a lot of wealth, but there's never enough. So they still live in a sense of scarcity. The other difference between wealth and rich is, I think of rich as more of like an income or a cash flow, like how much money somebody makes. So you can be a professional athlete making $10 million a year teetering on bankruptcy, or you can be a truck driver making $60,000 a year worth several $1,000,000. The first is rich, the second is wealthy. So wealth is about what you do with your money and what it does for you rather than just how much you make. I think there's a lot of rich people who squander those riches and don't know how to turn that into wealth. And there's a lot of wealthy people who were probably never rich, never made a ton of money, but they've planted that orchard a little bit here, a little bit there, and they never had a lot of trees. They never were able to plant a lot of seeds at any given time. But now that they've been doing it for 30, 40 years, they have wealth. They have a beautiful orchard that sustains them and their family. So I think those are a couple of the big differences. Wealthy, truly wealthy people who live an experience of abundance know what enough is. And people who have wealth, their money is building income for them, so they don't have to rely on a 6-figure, 7-figure job to sustain their lifestyle.
Hmm. Very true. One of the success quotes that I'm fond of currently is being successful is needing nothing and having everything.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's powerful. And then I also think about Shaquille O'Neal because, in the beginning, he was rich, right? He's like spending money, got cars, a big mansion. And I guess he, has some high up people and stuff like that, like investors and stuff like that. So he would talk to them. One day he was talking to them about like, how do you do it? Like, how do you make all this money? The investor said, do you know one of the main reasons why you're rich and not wealthy is because you spend your money, right? So basically, he got like $1 or something like that. And he's like, all right, I'm going to take this and you're going to spend that 50% and you're going to save this 50%. But you know what the wealthy people do? They take that 50% that you would have spent and they cut it again. So now we only have 25% to spend and 75% to save. But the saving is not only you put it into a bank account. he invests in franchises. So he has like, I don't know how many Five Guys like Shaquille O'Neal has. He has like 100 or something like that. And that is how he builds wealth. And we all have the opportunity to do that with our money. It's just that we say we're going to save 10%. We're going to put away for a rainy day. We have 3 to 6 months of living expenses, great, right? These are, good starting points, but what is the end goal? And I think many people struggle with that end goal. What should people be looking at?
Can I back up just a little bit
Of course, you
from that
back up as much as
question?
you need to.
I want to come back to your question. It's a very good question, but what you said was super critical, and I want to point it out to your audience. So I'm going to give them the instructions you did earlier. Get your pens out. One of the things that's difficult about wealth is we can't see it. What we think we see as wealth is not wealth. It's spending. It's consumption. The fast car, the Coach purse, the exotic vacation and the Instagram photos. That's not wealth. That might be a product of wealth, or it might just be a product of debt. We don't know. But none of those things are wealth. Those things are spending. It's consumption. And our society has learned to celebrate consumption and substitute it for wealth. Wealth is done behind closed doors. Wealth is what we don't see. It's the slow and steady investing. It's the tortoise that does the things in the dark that nobody sees. It's Kobe Bryant waking up at 3 a.m. to go train in an empty, dark gym. Everybody celebrates the slam dunks, but it's the building of his skill set was done in a cold, dark gym early in the morning, and that's what wealth is. It's done in secret. But what is celebrated is consumption. And people need to get past that and realize that building wealth is actually pretty boring. Consuming can be really fun, but you got to do the boring stuff first. And you mentioned Shaquille O'Neal and buying franchises and things like that. People are like, well, I don't have $1 million to drop on a franchise or $10 million. But that's the beauty of like a 401k with mutual funds is you can still buy parts of some of the best companies in the world. And you might be able to buy a big part, but you can invest in some of the greatest companies on planet Earth. It's just a very small share, a very small percentage. So you might not be able to do it exactly like some of these people, but even somebody 18 years old doing $50 a paycheck can still buy into some of the best companies in the world. But back to your question, it was about starting with intentionality around goals. And one of the questions that we ask people, I want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly. One of the first questions we ask when we meet with somebody is, if you were to quit your job next month, how much money, and don't worry about the source, but how much money would you need showing up in your checking account every single month to feel like you could give up your paycheck and live comfortably? And we use that to start building our long-term strategic goals. Because in order to build a job optional lifestyle, we've got to figure out what somebody needs to live off of to live independent from a paycheck. Now, we might have to bring down that number, eliminating debt, things like that, getting spending under control, but that's how it starts, is coming up with a measurable and meaningful objective for how much cash flow you would need to sustain your lifestyle. Now, we've got to adjust it for inflation, we've got to adjust it for withdrawal rates. Like there's a lot that needs to happen, but that's where it starts, is coming up with a measurable, meaningful goal of how much money do you need to live off of if you never had a paycheck ever again. That's where we start our financial planning process.
Powerful. And I think that's a good segue to kind of, let people know how they can find you, reach out to you, and then, begin the process to, getting their financial health back on track.
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of us, our website is veritasalaska.com. We work with folks all over the country, but we were founded here in Alaska, so we keep it in the URL. So veritasalaska.com. We're veritas.alaska on Instagram, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Just search for Chad Hufford. I'll pop right up.
And what's something that you hope people can take away from this episode today?
You may not be able to do everything you want to get your life back on track, but you have to start with something. So for some people, for anybody listening, what is the smallest change that you can make to get yourself headed in the right direction? And for some people listening, it might not be a financial thing. Maybe your finances are great, but you got high blood pressure, or maybe your marriage is on the rocks. What is the smallest step that you can commit to head in the right direction in that one area of your life, and make a plan to make a new habit with that? It doesn't have to be big. You're trying to lose weight. Don't try to lose 20 pounds this month. It might just be you're gonna cut out ice cream after 8 o'clock. I don't know what it is, but what is the smallest step you can make towards becoming a better version of yourself, and start taking those steps.
Beautiful. And I love these type of episodes because we start off strong. We don't where are we going with this? And we have so many golden nuggets in this episode today. And I do want to thank you for coming on, with the work that you're doing, sharing your expertise and, spending some time with us and just helping people understand that we can focus on the things that we can control. If we begin today, if we begin, where we are, that is the best place to begin. I understand we can look at our neighbor, we can look at our family. They could be in a different position than where we are right now. But it's not only about where everyone else is from where we are, it's about where we go with each step of our day. And I know that's a bit confusing. It basically is our journey is not theirs. If we are going to go and push in life, we have to worry about our steps, right? No one's going to take our steps for us. So we have to be accountable for ourselves and our steps. And I think today is going to be a great opportunity for you to lean into that type of mindset and mentality and begin to make some changes. So I do want to thank you, Chad, for coming on, spending some time, as I said, and just being that person that helps people realize that their dreams can become reality. It just takes some consistent planning.
Well, Michael, I appreciate the honor has been mine, and it's been a pleasure being here, talking to you and talking with your audience.